Howdy YouTube, Murphy Firearms Training here. I have got the Ruger SP101. It is chambered in .357 Magnum, and I wanted to do a video on how to strip this gun down for a deep clean, or in the case of what happened to me, you get caught out in torrential rain and your gun is just soaking wet and you want to make sure you get all the water out and make sure you don't get some rust in the mechanism. So I want to show you, and I've already done this and I wanted to come back on camera and show you how to do it. It's actually not as hard as I thought it was. These things are built pretty simply actually. So first thing we got to do with any Ruger to get this thing apart, we got to get the grip off. And the Rugers use a mono grip. There's just a single grip. It's not a two-piece panel like your Smiths and your Tauruses and those guys. So, all right, so we'll take our screw out. These are factory SP101 grips, so we'll put the screw there. And then these two side panels are going to pop out. And you can take the screwdriver and pop them out, right here. What I actually like to do is take a really thin punch and just grab where the thread goes in and pop that out. It pops out real easy that way. Roll this over. Oh, and before I forget, when you pop this right-hand side grip off, there's this little pin that's in the factory grip of this SP101, and I'm going to save that. We're going to need that in a minute, okay? So we'll take that, go ahead and pop this in here. Same thing, we're just going to pry that loose, okay? So set our grip panels to the side. We'll put those up here. They'll be fine. Put our pin there. Okay, now, this pin actually pushes through, so we're going to push that out. You'll see it sticking out of the revolver grip there. We're going to push that pin out. With that pin out, the grip comes right off, okay? And you'll see I left this gun dirty. I want to kind of let you see what happens. A lot of dirt actually piles up right here. We're going to clean that up before we put this gun back together. But that's got the grip off. Now, how to get this thing apart for a deep clean and to get everything loose, get it down to the frame. Step one is you're going to pull the hammer back. Now, see, here's your hammer spring. This is your main spring here. You're going to pull your hammer back into full lockup. And we're going to take this little pin that came out of the grip, and it's actually going to go into this hole here. Okay, so you see you got this little hole in the bottom of your mainspring. You're going to put that pin in. I'm going to turn the gun vertically. Okay, so you see my pin just kind of hanging out there. We're going to let this hammer forward gently. Okay, and here's what happens. The main spring is now captured. Okay, so that captures the main spring. It puts all this play into it. Push it up, push it out the side like so. Pull it out. That's your main spring. Now, once your main spring is out, if you pull the trigger, nothing happens because there's nothing driving that hammer forward. Okay, so now you've got all the spring tension off. Now you're ready to move ahead and start tearing this gun down. The next step is to push this pin, which is this little guy here, out. Okay, and the easiest way to do that, sometimes, depending on how much the gun's been shot, this one I can do it with. I can use my fingernail and get it started usually. But if you don't have that option, option two is to set the gun up like so and take a brass punch or a steel punch. I prefer brass because it won't mar the gun. Take a brass punch, take your hammer, just put it over the end here and give it a tap. Okay, a couple of taps, no big deal. And we see that guy's coming loose from the side frame here. So this guy's coming loose, and we're going to rotate that, twist it out. Okay, when you pop that loose, the hammer is going to get, pretty wonky here. And you're going to jiggle and wiggle. And unfortunately, I have yet to figure out a good way for this other than to just jiggle. Okay, and it may help to pull the trigger slightly to unlock the cylinder. Not always, but basically we're going to try and get this hammer out. Okay, there it goes. So the hammer comes out. So that's your hammer assembly. Okay, ta-da. If you ever wanted to see that. So that's your hammer assembly. Okay, now here's the tricky part. We want to get the trigger. You'll see this line here. Okay, this line. This whole trigger assembly comes out. It rotates out. And what's holding it, let me get something to point with, is this pin right here. This pin, focus for me, camera, right here. Okay. And there's actually a hole in the back of the frame that's meant to push on that pin. If I can get my camera to focus, okay? So that's meant to go like so. It does take a great amount of force, and I'm going to stress a great amount of force. So what I have found is the best way to do this is to actually put it against my body. This is why my belly is always bruised, because I do stuff like this. But I put it against my body, and I get this punch just so, and I push. Okay? Now with that pushed in, I get it started rotating. Okay? Pull the punch out. Once you get it started, that pin's pushed in, you're good, and you're going to just rotate that downward. Comes right out. There's your trigger assembly. Your last step is your cylinder. With that out, the cylinder just comes right out, yoke and all. Okay? You now have this gun stripped down to the frame. Okay, this is stripped to the frame. You can get in here and clean anywhere you want. And I'll let you guys see. It's not too dirty inside. But, you know, there's some grit and some dirt and some grime. Again, I took this thing apart and said, oh, I should make a video of this. I have not cleaned it up at all. That's how it looked when I took it apart. So, but there's your frame, your trigger assembly. I do strongly advise, if you do anything with this trigger assembly, clean it with a cleaner that evaporates. And then if you oil it, put back some type of oil that will evaporate. Some kind of like Teflon cleaner that will evaporate. It's alcohol-based, something like that. Just because if you don't, it can create issues. Because what will happen, guys, is if you just come in and just oil this heavily, or worse yet, grease it, this trigger assembly, what happens is any little grit and grime will now stick to this. Okay, it'll stick, and I'm not going to say that it'll cause you problems. It really depends on how much you shoot your gun. But if you, you know, if you shoot your gun a lot, or if you carry your gun, especially if you carry your gun a lot, you're going to gum up this trigger assembly and mess up your trigger. At the very least, make your trigger pull less smooth. So anyway, this is a totally disassembled gun. Now, what I'm going to do, I am going to clean this up, lubricate everything, and put it back together. Okay, but to save me some time, I'm going to go ahead and just put it back together for you guys to show you the reverse procedure and a couple of issues you're going to run into, and then I'll take it back down, not on video, and clean and oil and do all of that. So, step one, you're going to put your cylinder back onto the gun. Okay, so line that up, place it on, go ahead and close it. Okay, so you'll notice this turns freely because your cylinder releases on the trigger, and the trigger is not there. You're going to have to line that up eventually, okay? Step two, reverse order here pretty much. We're going to put the trigger back. It does hook in the front. See, there's this hook. See this hook here? It hooks into the frame in the front. Do not start shoving this thing up in there. Get it hooked, and then wait. And you're going to come in here, okay? Your transfer bar, depending on the orientation of the gun, this transfer bar will get jammed up in here underneath this ledge that I'm touching with my punch. I have found the best way to do this is to point the gun up. Point the gun up. And really keep an eye on things and try to make sure they're not getting jammed up. Let me pull this back out and show you your two issues. This transfer bar and this piece right here. These two things, especially this one, the transfer bar, depending on your orientation, it'll go all the way forward and it'll hit, and you cannot get this assembly back in. So anyway, make sure everything's back and happy. Hook your front end here, okay? And then we've got to go in and get this thing to snap in. Now, what I'm going to do here, this spring tension pin, if you wrap this hard enough, it'll go. But I don't like to force something where metal can bend. So I'm going to take my flathead screwdriver and I'm going to squeeze that pin in, okay? And once you get it to here, now you can just take your hands, and I'm going to tip the gun back, and I lost it, so I got to redo it. But, okay, tip the gun up, okay, check, and you see there it is, it's jamming. So you see what's happening is the transfer bar, even with the gun pointed up, the transfer bar is hitting the gun. And so you got to go in there with something. Again, a flathead screwdriver works great. just pry that thing back. If I can get it in there. Come on. This stuff always works so much better when you're not on camera. There we go. All right. So, one more time. This is the only part of putting this thing back together that's a real pain, is getting that transfer bar lined up to go. Okay? And it's hitting again. I'm going to have to give it a wrap and get it to go, but give me 1 second and we'll get it back in. All right, so I've got this thing back where it belongs. So you'll see there's a gap here, okay, between the transfer bar and the pistol. So I've got it lined up. You're going to take this and just snap it in place. You'll hear it click. You'll see that pin seat, okay? Give it a tug, make sure it's seated, okay? Now at this point, you can actually pull the trigger and see the cylinder timing and the transfer bar working, all of that's working. And I like to do that to make sure I'm putting it back together right. So that's the second step. Now, to get the hammer back in, this is the, I don't know, it's fidgety. It's not bad, but it's a little fidgety. Okay, I have found the best way to do it is to get the hammer, put it in, and when you go in, if you go back here, it won't go down far enough. You have to go all the way forward. Go all the way forward with the hammer. And then it will go down far enough. And you'll know because you'll get the right hole lined up, and then it won't want to come back out. Once you get it lined up right, it actually doesn't like to come back out. And that's because it's hooked onto the trigger. And you have to fidget with it to get it to come back out. So anyway, if you put it in like this, you'll see it looks like the hole is lined up. Okay. But then when you go all the way forward, you're good. It's hooked. It's lined up. So I put that trigger all the way forward. And you got to get this thing to line up. And again, the best way to do that is just take like a punch or something and kind of twist and torque. And what I found out was just you've got to put a little upward pressure on this hammer. Get this thing lined up and get this to go back in. And again, it's not difficult. It's just a little fidgety because it doesn't want to line up. And so you kind of have to sit and play with it. So I just sit and kind of pull and twist, and there it goes. It just falls. Once you get it, it just falls right in. And again, I'm going to give this a check. So yes, the hammer cocks the cylinder. If I pull it that way, okay. If I push this, I see the firing pin sticking through, okay. So everything's in place. Everything's working. Everything locks up. Okay, so these little checks as you go along. Now, your main spring. We're going to take this guy and let me orient my pistol the correct way here. Okay. This piece is going to go to the front of the gun. So we're going to slide that in and up. Okay. And then with this, just like that, we're going to cock the hammer. Okay. Partially cocked, you seat the spring, finish cocking it, your little bar falls out. Okay. Cool deal. Ease that hammer forward. That spring will keep itself in place. It is self-locking. Okay, so once it's under spring tension, everything should function just like normal. Your last step is to put your grips on. So you'll put your grip right there. Put this pin through. Okay, all that pin does is keep this grip from sliding off, which I think is a really neat feature because truthfully, I wouldn't want that sliding off while I was shooting. Go ahead and put my little disassembly pin back in the hole in the grip. And go ahead and put my grip panels on. Boom, boom. And then put your screw back. Okay, it's that easy. So, if you're ever interested in how to take a Ruger apart for deep cleaning, that's how you do it. And then again, tension this screw so that I don't worry about it coming loose. Give it a couple of test fires. Cool deal. So the Ruger SP101, that's how she comes apart. That's how she goes together. And then of course, while you've got it apart, you should lubricate the inside. And again, I strongly recommend something that's going to evaporate, an evaporative cleaner. I have a 3-in-1 oil with Teflon. It's alcohol-based, and so what it does, it actually leaves a thin layer of Teflon, but the actual liquid itself evaporates. Great for inside of the guns. You know, I've heard someone say they use CLP for this. Again, that's one of those things that doesn't leave a thick, oily residue. I would not put gun oil all inside my trigger because you're going to get a bunch of gunk buildup. But again, it depends on you. If you're a person who would take this gun apart and deep clean it once a year, it's not going to matter. But if you do this and then 10 years from now you haven't touched it, your trigger might gunk up. I don't know. So to each his own, guys, but I hope it helps you. I hope it's useful information. It's pretty cool. You do need a fairly long, skinny punch to get that trigger pin out. My standard punch set that I have here, you know, they're not long enough because this is a little too fat to go through the hole in the grip. So, but that's how we take apart the SP101. Any gun that is in the Ruger SP101 family would come apart like that. This is a 2-inch 357 Magnum, but in any of the SP101s or guns that are very similarly put together, I think the GP100s also come apart like this. So anyway, hope it helps. Please leave any questions you have in the comments. Like and subscribe. I really do appreciate your support. And give me any ideas you have for any other videos. If I can make it, I'll be glad to. Thanks, guys.